Ako, pag-share.
Sige. Hello, everyone. Whoever's watching. Welcome to another Uncaught exception mini session. In these sessions, we share like whatever technology you want to share or you learn something new. Each sharing session will usually take like 10 minutes or something, but it's up to you. So for today, who would like to share anything?
So maybe I could go first. So I'll share Django stuff because that's what I did today. Okay. So Django stuff. Should we start? Okay, so I'll share about Django, and so Django is like a really good web framework, Python web framework, and it's used by many people and being actively developed. If you go to, let me share my screen. One sec. I have problem sharing my screen. It's like,
Well, Emmanuel is still restarting his Chrome to allow permissions share screen.
okay, I'm back. Okay, I think I can share my screen now. So Django is like a very powerful web framework, Python web framework, 51.3K stars on GitHub, and it's being actively maintained by many people. So we love this framework, we use this for work, um, but this framework was originally built to build server rendered pages. Like you have a view that renders HTML, and then the browser gets the HTML. When you click a link, it will reload the page, send the request to the server again. Server gets generates the HTML and sends the response. But in today's day and age, SPA or single page application has become like very common. Um, but there has been tools around Django that were developed by very smart developers to allow Django to be used as backend for um, single page applications. And the most famous one, I think, is um, Django REST framework. So what Django REST framework is It's a library. It's built on top of Django that allows you to build API endpoints very easily while utilizing the power of Django's ORM. And then also with single page applications, authentication is also a bit different. In normal server rendered applications, you typically use sessions or cookies to store authentication information. But nowadays, it's different. There's OAuth, and there's also this thing called JWT or JSON Web Token. So this allows for stateless or like your API endpoints could be accessed outside the browser, or the authentication information could be shared across different domains. So with Django's framework, it has a pluggable authentication system, and there's also a library for you to use with Django's framework to enable JWT. So it's simple JWT. Let's see what comes up. Yep, it's Django REST framework, simple JWT. So this is the one that's being endorsed by DRF itself. So, but authentication with JWT is a common thing now, and then this particular library only allows for like the generation, validation, and refresh of JWT. It doesn't really offer you the views and whatnot to be able to generate to interact with the client. So there's also a library called the djoser. So DJ djoser or djoser is a library for authentication. It can be used for many things. It could just be like straight up as a rendered website authentication where you have a page and then user enters username, password, create account page or verify account page with emails and stuff. But it has support for DRF, and then you could use it to um, generate JWTs, and then it plays well with simple JWT, or it actually is the library that's endorsed by JDuser, JDJ user or the djoser for JWT. So let's try all those. Let's look at a project that I recently built using all those. So I have a project called Random Rooms. I built it this morning. So what I'm trying to do is basically something like an Omegle for chat, where you just go to the next room, but you don't really know what the next room is. So something like that. Random rooms. Then each room is like a different message thread, but it's not yet done. So here in my requirements, you can see that I have Django REST framework, I have Django, I have, uh, I think, simple. Okay, it's not that. Uh, just, so I have Django REST framework, SimpleJWT, and djoser. And then So let's look at the settings first because this is where it begins. So I have those libraries in my installed apps. And then for Django REST framework, I configured it to use SimpleJWT as JWT authentication as one of the default authentication classes. And then I've configured SimpleJWT to use JWT or bearer as the auth header types. So this is something like, so in your header you something have something like authentication colon bearer bearer then whatever the JWT is. So that is the setup. And then so JWT I think has like three core things that you are normally dealing with. So one is the serializer. So this is a serializer for my model called room. So in Django, a model is basically like a class representing a table on your database. So my model room has a UUID field, a name, which is the char field, created date time, and then an owner, which is a user. So my serializer for that it's called room serializer. It extends from model serializer from REST framework. Uh, it has the fields name and UUID and read-only field UUID. So meaning when we create a new room, you don't have to provide UUID, you just have to provide the name. And then that's one. Serializer. What serializer is it's a one single class that could convert your model object into JSON and can accept JSON and then convert it to your model object. So vice versa. And then we have a view, or in this case, a view set. So a view is basically the class that handles the request from the client. So a view set in Django's framework is basically just one class that could do many things. Like for example, you can provide UUID in the URL, and then this view set could return the JSON of the room given that UUID. It could allow you to create a new room, and it could list all rooms. So in one single class, it does all those three things, and it's a very short function. That's why DRF is very famous. It's got a lot of very good built-ins, so that you don't have to write a lot of code to just get started. So here I have overridden the list method. So what I'm trying to do is I want to, when you send a request to this view to list all rooms, it doesn't really list all rooms. It will give you one random room, and then that's where you should be going next. So simple logic there. I count all rooms. I generate a random index from the total count, and then I get the room at that specific index. And then my serializer class is the room serializer. So you pass in the query, many equals true. So serializers or model serializers are capable of deserializing or converting an object to JSON or converting a query to a list of or converting a query to a list of objects or just an array. So this is what you get. And then so we have serializers, we have view sets, and then we also have routers. So routers are basically just in Django you can specify URLs to uh, URLs that will handle specify the URL or the path, and then what view handles those. In a typical Django application, you have one URL per view, and then you have to write that one by one. But So in our case, for this particular class, if you don't use a URL router, you'll have to have two URL endpoint, two URLs here, one for listing and one for getting the detail where you specify the UUID. But with Django REST frameworks router class, you can just simply instantiate a new router, specify the prefix, and then the viewset that will handle that, and then it will generate all the URL patterns needed to support all the capabilities of your room viewset. And then you load this URL to the main URL file. So you can see that here. Okay, so that's how we built the endpoint for getting the rooms. So as you can see here, we could test it out. No, not that one. Okay, my token has expired. One sec. Let me just copy this. Okay, so here we have the response of the list endpoint for rooms. So as you can see, we have rooms, which is the prefix we specified in our URL. You have slash API here before rooms because when we loaded it in the main URL, we added the slash API in here. So that is that. So our serializer specified that there is a name field and a UUID, and that's exactly what you get. And then so that's how we make your own endpoint using DRF. Then let's talk about authentication using simple JWT and djoser or whatever that is. So we have installed SimpleJWT. As I've shown you in the settings a while ago, we used it as one of the default authentication classes. So the default authentication classes kicks in if your view your view class does not specify an authentication class. So if you can specify your own authentication class here, then these authentication classes will not be used. But by default, we are using simple JWT's JWT authentication, and we have JWT and bearer as the header types. So that's all it's basically is needed for simple JWT to work. And then we also need to um, allow the DJ users URLs to be loaded so that it could be accessed. So to do that, you need to include DJ users URLs and DJ users JWT URLs here, and then that is pretty much it. So with those added in your code, then you will have a new endpoint called auth JWT create. You can supply the username and password in the post body. And then if those are correct, you get a refresh token and your JWT, which is under the access keyword. So you can just copy this in your so every get request or every request that you send to an API endpoint, if that particular API endpoint is protected by any authentication. For example, in our case, yes, it is protected because you can see here permission classes is authenticated. So you have to be authenticated to access this endpoint. Then we can pass in the JWT here. as part of the authorization header. So if you want to see, it looks like this: authorization, bearer, and then your JWT here. And then we send the request, and then you get the response. So there we go. We already have authentication. It's not only create JWT, it's many other endpoints, but we can look at one other, refresh, JWT refresh. What JWT refresh does is it allows you to create to have a new JWT token, and but by doing this, it will invalidate the old one. So if we do that, we need to send in the refresh token in the refresh endpoint. So it in the post body, you can just send a JSON with key refresh, and the value is the refresh token, and then you send it. You will get a new JWT. So the old JWT now will be, oh, it's still working. Okay. So you only do this if your JWT expires. So you get a new one, and then it also works. So that is authentication. Then, so with those in place, you can build up all the API endpoints that you need to build your application. But it's typical for like a REST endpoint to have documentation, because most likely in your project you'll have a different backend developer and a different front-end developer working on the SPA. So maybe it's using Angular or Vue.js or React or whatever. So it's good to have documentation so that the front-end developer can understand what API endpoints to use for what specific screen. So to do this, there's several libraries available, but one of the famous one is Swagger. So if you just search Swagger, which is I think the old name, it's called Open API now, if I remember correctly. Okay, so this one. So it allows for automatic schema documentation for your endpoints. And then REST framework actually endorses this particular library to be used. So let's find that out. I forgot the name. So it's DRF YASG, or just yet another Swagger generator for DRF. So you just include that in your requirements, and then in your settings, or actually in your URLs, um, you just need to create a schema view. You can import schema view from DRF, yet another Swagger generator, and then pass all these information, and then load the views here. So with that, you will already have an automatically generated Swagger. Automatically generated documentation for all the API endpoints available um, in your application. So here you have our API rooms, and then you can open it and you can click try it out, and then execute. And here is a sample response and the headers that you get, time duration, etc., etc. So if you have like uh, say staging environment that your front end developer could use to test out the different endpoints, then that's good. Or if you have a Docker image build with this that the front end developer could just run on his own and access this page, then it will be a lot easier for him or her to understand the different endpoints and what they do, improving communication between teams, and at the same time speeding up the development process. So I guess that is it. If you have any questions, it's time to ask now.
Thanks, everyone. I have no questions about a lot of things like DRM or simple GWT or user and Swagger.
So yeah,
So
so
that's a lot.
that was like a typical architecture or what you'd normally put in a typical backend API with Django. So it's I don't think it's hard because the libraries are a lot. All those libraries are very mature, and just pip install, add in settings, and then voila, it's working right away. And there's a lot of documentation for them.
Uh, yeah. So just wanted to make sure I got it properly. So simple GWT it's a plugin for DRF so that DRF will be able to support GWT tokens,
Yes.
right? And then djoser,
Yep.
yeah, okay,
DJ
thanks.
also.
It just adds the
Yes,
URLs
the
for
create the views.
authentication and I mean
Yes,
the
that
views
you need.
okay. And
Yes.
Swagger documentation. Very useful.
The
Faye has
swag, the swagger, is it the same with the endpoints?
Uh,
The
so the
is it the same?
endpoints,
Looks like the
the
same.
endpoints application that we built, it's not the same. Swagger is like a schema generator. So what a schema is like you have an API endpoint, right? So it typically responds JSON, but JSON is like not very structured. It's just basically a key value pair. So what the schema is for example that particular endpoint, it tells you what the JSON looks like. So it will say that this endpoint will accept these particular parameters. Name, it has to be a string. UUID, it's a UUID, blah blah blah. And then in response, it sends this particular data. Name, it's a string, blah blah blah. So notice that in our code, we didn't write any of those. So, but Swagger is a library that takes your endpoints and then your serializers within those are used within those endpoints, and then generates the schema for you to build an to automatically build a documentation of your API endpoints. All of those, but endpoints,
Ah,
the software that we build or the application we build is basically you create your own endpoint, a random one, and then paste in the response that you want um, to send if anybody sends a request to that particular URL, and then you get that response. So that's two different things.
okay.
maybe someday we should share about how we build endpoints.
It's like 2 years ago when
Yeah.
AIO
Yeah.
Yeah.
HTTP was still a thing, or was famous, but now it seems like Fast API is getting all the attention. So
So any other questions from others parents? Okay.
No question. But
okay, next
Jump REST
presentation. Then.
REST framework supports
I think
OpenAPI on the latest version, but it's still buggy. So it's good When it's better if you use third-party library also like OIA, SG. But
Yep.
yeah, it's already supported, just buggy.
Yeah. Yeah. OpenAPI
Yeah.
is built in on the RFCS setup, but let's use the mature one.
Yeah, so there are no more questions. I think we are at the 30-minute mark,
Already?
which is usually which is usually how long our episodes last. So, but Emma has also shared like enough like libraries and tech that are good for like 3 people sharing. So I think we can we can we can end it here. And if you're watching this in the future, if you have questions, you can leave it in the comments. So yeah.
All right.
So I guess that would be it for today. If no more questions, see you. So we will be doing these streams every Saturday at 9 p.m. GMT plus 8. So see you in the next one.
See you in
Bye.
the next one.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.